I'm Julie Zenner along with Dennis Anderson, and here's what's coming up on Almanac North.
Local and state leaders will meet in Duluth next week for a housing summit. Officials will look for answers in the city's critical need for housing, which could be hindering economic development.
The colorful history of Esko and Thomson Township is featured in a new book that was a true community effort.
And we'll bring you some of the week's top business stories, along with a news file story from 25 years ago.
It's all coming up next on Almanac North. Hello and welcome to Almanac North. Thanks for watching. This week's show was recorded on Friday afternoon. And Denny, you look pretty good in our new high definition studio cameras.
I had to use extra makeup.
I didn't use extra makeup,
Oh.
I just took the extra 10 years.
Well, there you go.
We've got some good guests, so let's get started.
All right, Julie, thank you and welcome everyone.
A day-long summit on housing issues in the city of Duluth is coming up at the Deck next week. City leaders are focusing on a critical need for housing and looking for solutions. State and local leaders are scheduled to attend, and the event is open for the public for a small registration fee. Joining us now to talk housing is Don Ness, the mayor of Duluth, and David Ross is the president and the CEO of the Duluth Area Chamber of Commerce. Mayor, and both of you, welcome. We keep hearing words like urgent and critical. How is the housing needs of Duluth affecting this community?
Well, I think we're on the, I'll add another word, I think we're on the verge of a crisis.
Really?
And you know, what we're seeing is because of the economic activity that's happening, the new jobs that we're creating, whether it be at AAR or Cirrus, Enbridge, the engineering sector, skilled manufacturing Duluth, they're all growing companies, and we're bringing folks into the city, but they are having a really hard time finding quality, affordable housing, especially in that range, what we call workforce housing.
Yeah.
People that are making between $30,000 and $60,000 a year. Good paying jobs that can support a family, but they're having a hard time finding housing that accommodates their needs.
Mm-hmm. Now, Duluth's housing stock is pretty old. I read somewhere 65% or so is over 50 years old.
Yeah.
How does that impact the community, particularly some of the lower income neighborhoods where you're dealing with this?
What's popular right now is multiple housing, shared wall, single floor for both people on both ends of the spectrum. The retirees want to have the kind of home that typically wasn't built 65, 70 years ago when our housing stock was really brought to this community. And as well, young professionals can only afford smaller spaces, but they want that space to be very efficient. They want strong amenities and yet small apartments and homes that are square footage that they can afford with a college debt that they may still have. And that calls for a new type of home with new construction and new design, and that's what we're hoping to encourage.
So I think the other part of that is that especially folks that may be coming from a different part of the country or a different part of the state where they're used to a newer housing stock, and they're coming to Duluth and seeing homes that could use a little bit of renovation, but they're starting fresh in a new job, in a new community, and the last thing that they want to do is spend a year renovating an old space. So they're looking for new product that, as David mentioned, either the multifamily or the single-level townhome or the new home construction with the open floor plan, and we just can't offer it right now.
It seems here a few years ago, investors came into the community and they built homes that might be on the high end, and they don't seem to be selling quite as well. Is there an overstock of those kinds of homes?
What happened really was in 2005, 6, 7, right before the economic challenge, there was a great deal of activity related to housing, in particular the condominiums. We saw all of the projects come up at the same time. And then the hardships came in 2008 and beyond, and people that were involved in that housing have pulled out of it because of financial concerns, or they've left town, or they've gone to North Dakota to do construction there. And what we really have to do now is encourage people to come back to the community and begin to build again and give them incentives to do so.
Are you finding that people who are coming to Duluth for jobs, are they actually looking outside the city for the kinds of homes that they want, either rural or up in Hermantown or other close by communities?
Well, there's no question, and you know, especially the person that's looking for that newer product. You know, a lot of the new growth has been in those outlying communities, and so that's where they're finding it. But it's also, you know, what Hermantown and Esko are offering are primarily the single-family homes, and in some cases the townhomes. But what the real demand is, especially for those young professionals that are entering the market, are the multifamily housing. You know, the nice, efficient apartment that they can be close to where they work and be part of a vibrant downtown community, but have a nice place to live.
Gentlemen, what do you hope to accomplish through this upcoming Duluth Housing Summit?
Well, we really want to tell the broader narrative about what's happening in Duluth and give those developers that may have either gone to the Twin Cities or focused in North Dakota to say, we have an urgent need in the city of Duluth. There's a market that needs to be met, and so take a fresh look at the opportunities in Duluth.
And let them know as well that there are incentives and there are state programs, local programs that will help them make that investment with a lower amount of risk.
Now, is this summit then primarily focused on housing as it relates to economic development, or are you looking at the broader spectrum of housing in the community, the low-income housing, the student housing, you know, all of these other things that influence the market here?
Well, what we've seen over the last 15, 20 years is that the economics work on the very high end, whether the $300,000 condo or the $300,000 new McMansion. And there's also a lot of public tools that are available to do the subsidized housing. And I think, you know, we have good stock of both of those and the tools to encourage the development of each of those. But what we're missing again is that workforce housing for the person making between $30,000 and $60,000. And there isn't the product in the market right now. There's a tremendous amount of demand, and so we need to tell that story and hopefully encourage folks. And we know that this sort of investment, there's risk involved. There's always risk if you're going to build new, but we think that it's a good risk to take, and that we're committed to making sure that the developers that are investing in Duluth are going to be successful.
So are young professionals looking to rent rather than buy?
In many cases, yes, because they're also graduating with $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 of student loans, and the banks are more conservative in terms of what their standards are for first-time home buyers. So they're looking for that nice quality rental so that they don't have to share a single-family home with 5 other roommates.
David, what's going on in the chatter with the Chamber of Commerce in this housing? What you're saying now could be a critical problem.
Our board of directors talked about this last year. We've been continuing to focus on it, and that's why we're a part of this initiative next week, is we recognize how important it is with all the work that has been done to bring opportunity to our community and bring investment, bring jobs. That's all happening. The one thing that's holding us back is the amount of housing that's available to those new transplants to Duluth and to the people who are now ready to make an investment in a home in Duluth. So if we can get the housing thing worked out, I think Duluth is on the cusp of a real strong growth experience.
Duluth has been very focused on historic preservation. Do you see opportunities with some of the older housing stock that we have to really transform existing housing into, you know, good quality, safe, affordable places for people to live, or are you thinking that we need to get rid of some of this and do some infill new construction?
Well, it has to be both, and I don't think we're talking about getting rid of the housing stock. In fact, you know, when you have even a home that's been neglected and has fallen apart, it's still more economical to invest in that and breathe new life into that home than it is to build new, and that allows you to get into that $50,000 to $225,000 single-family home, whereas it's very difficult to build at that level. So. I think there's a tremendous opportunity for folks to relook at the model of taking some of these older homes, spend 6 months fixing them up so that the new person coming into town doesn't have to look at that 6 months of renovation.
We're hearing terms today like detached and semi-detached housing. I don't know if this is a term that the young professionals have started using, but they're looking, it sounds like then, for semi-detached, that is, that they would want to be in a community?
I think so, yeah. I mean, and you know, there's many different markets at play, and we know that the retiree housing model is also booming right now in the city of Duluth. Folks that want to stay in Duluth during their retirement age, but don't necessarily need to be in the larger single-family home. They're looking to move into the townhome, whether it's side-by-side or their own single-family one level. So. And that's the other part of this, is that we need to increase the variety of housing options in the city of Duluth. And unfortunately right now we have a lot of single-family homes. We don't have a lot of other options beyond that.
So is there a market for single-family homes? Somebody's retired, they want to sell their house, move into a condo. Is there a market for the house they're trying to sell?
I believe there is, and there's a market as well for apartments. If people are thinking about building a home, hopefully they'll come to this session and maybe make it a duplex or maybe make it a fourplex instead, and see that there's great opportunity here to do well with housing. The biggest initiative down in the cities right now, Minneapolis, St. Paul, is apartment complexes where each unit is 500 square feet or smaller. But with that, and that's for young professionals, they want the underground parking, they want the amenities, a reception area, things such as that.
Here's how all the pieces fit together. Unfortunately right now, because we don't have enough apartment, market rate apartments, those then are going into the single family homes, which are then raising the price of the rents in the single family homes and not providing an opportunity for the young family to either buy that home as a home ownership or afford to rent the entire home.
How much does this have to do with the influx of students every year? What impact does the college population have on the availability of housing?
We know that within our community, our vacancy rate within rentals is 2%, and they say within a healthy community that has the right number of options, it should be 5% or more. So having these students here certainly does put great pressure on the young professional who is now looking to secure an apartment or a home.
What about just lots available for new construction? Do we need to create more buildable lots within the city or designate more buildable lots?
We have a surprising number of lots that are available and ready to go today, and so we certainly want to encourage them to start filling those up and then create the next problem, which is, all right, let's look at the next round of opportunities to create those, where those shovel-ready sites that you have the utilities and the street infrastructure in place. But my guess is that we probably have, a couple hundred, if not several hundred, lots that are ready to go, ready for construction today.
So who's buying homes today? Is it people born in the early 80s, mid-80s?
Buying homes, I think this is part of this transition because you have a lot of folks who are getting those first professional jobs, but they're in a place because they have so much student debt and they're not necessarily wanting to commit to home ownership, that they're looking for that nice market rate apartment.
So is there a glut on the real estate market now of single family homes?
No, but what we're seeing is the conversion of those single family homes into the rentals to meet that, and that changes the nature of our neighborhoods and creates a whole set of other problems.
Are there still opportunities for people in the community who may have not responded and said they were going to be at the summit? Can anybody show up for it, or what's the process?
We welcome attendance. There's 200 people already signed up, and you'd mentioned at the outset the registration, it's $5. We're encouraging our community to come to this, and anyone who's thinking about the possibility of doing development in this community or housing, please join us. It'll be a wealth of information.
All right, Mayor, thank you very much. Thank you very much too, David.
Thank you.
Both of you coming here and talk about this vital issue.
Thank you.
Now, let's dig into our news file archive for a look at what was making news 25 years ago this week.
We will be now, instead of 5,400 people, we'll be 8,500 or 8,400. I think the sign will lead 8,417.
The unveiling of a new sign today made it clear the new International Falls would not be confused with the old International Falls. But the population isn't the only difference.
It's going to mean more money in state aid for streets. It's going to mean more efficient government. We will be doing away with the duplication of services.
The two communities officially merged on January 23rd of this year, and with the promise no one would lose their job in the consolidation, it may be surprising South International Falls refused to merge just 2 years ago.
This time when we brought it up again, and all of the benefits were brought forth and laid on the table, then of course there were some changes. The expansion at the mill now, that $525 million means more tax base, and that was a good plum for South International Falls. So both communities saw gains in it, so they voted overwhelmingly in favor of it.
In International Falls, Colleen Burns, KDLH News.
The well-known saying, "It takes a village to raise a child," is a good analogy for our next topic, because it took a true community effort to create a new hardcover book on the history of Esko and Thomson Township. The small Carleton County communities have a history that might surprise you, and our next guest played a major role in shepherding the project to completion. Davis Helberg was chair of the book project committee and the book's editor. Welcome, Davis.
Thank you.
It's been a while. Most folks might know you as a former Duluth Port director, but you have a passion for history.
Well, I do, and also for writing, and you know, despite my public persona for a long time in the Great Lakes shipping industry, I've been a scribbler since I was a boy, and I spent, along the course of my career, I interrupted my shipping experiences for 6 years as a Duluth News Tribune reporter in the 60s. And then I wrote for many years for Lake Superior Magazine, the Great Lakes Seaway Review, and other publications, as well as the Port Authority magazine. So writing and history have also been a passion. And now I have a little more time to pursue those ends.
This book, Esko's Corner, is a large volume, a good coffee table book. I didn't realize there was so much history in Esko. There's 400-some pages in there.
Well, we've been telling people it's probably the biggest book on the planet written about a small podunk township, but it's got a great and rich history. And I think even those of us, the dozen or so of us who were on the volunteer committee for the Esko Historical Society, had our eyes opened in terms of the depth and wealth of history there is in our community.
So was there a Mr. Esko in a nutshell? Can you give us a little bit of the history of that?
Yeah, I was in trouble when you're asking me for a nutshell. You know.
Very small.
Not a coconut.
Right. Alex Esko followed his father here in 1880 from Finland.
Okay.
His father then was killed in a sawmill accident in Thompson. Alex went on to become a railroad land agent, acquired property in what would later become downtown Esko, our town center. In late 1919, he built a general store. It was on today's Thompson Road. At that time, it was the Duluth to Twin City Highway. All right. An intersection was there that also headed west to the fledgling communities of Scanlon and Cloquet. So the story is, anyway, that when people would be getting directions in Duluth, say, how do I get to St. Paul? The directions would be, go to Esko's Corner and turn south, or if you're going to Cloquet, go to Esko's Corner, go west. And so that little store, which incidentally was immediately across the highway from the Esko School, the Lincoln School, which opened in the fall of 1920, meant that the community grew around that intersection, that store, that school.
Anytime you start poking around in history, you're bound to come up with some things that you didn't expect. Were there secrets that you dug up, or sordid characters, or just colorful people, or things that people who live in Esko might not even know about?
Well, I think there's a lot of history that Esko people today don't know about, just because the dynamics of the community have changed so dramatically. You know, back when I was born in 1940, so growing up in the 40s and 50s, it was predominantly Finnish. People had Finnish accents routinely. You'd hear Finnish spoken in the co-op store or Juntie store at the gas stations, the school custodial force, and so on. Today, there's probably about 20% of people with some Finnish heritage, but the community's become a bedroom suburb for Duluth in a very healthy way. Right. So there's a lot of folks who have moved in the last 50 years who really wouldn't have a sense of that history anyway. But even for those of us who have been there all our lives, I mean, we had people, for example, Hosumaya, which stands for Pants Mary, who was a woman who came from Finland when she was in her 30s, it was about 1890 or so. Always wore men's trousers, worked like a man, was tough, but also loved children, was active in her church, became a landowner, became quite wealthy, and would give low-interest loans to people buying property. Wow. But she cut pulpwood, she made fence posts, Hosumaya.
You've got 160-some pictures in this book. From where did you glean all of that material?
Well, when Julie said at the outset that this was a community project, that's almost an understatement. Not only did we have the dozen or so of us who were actively researching and writing, but there was a fundraising committee that generated about $35,000, far more than we expected, which enabled us to put out a book of this quality. People opened up their scrapbooks, their photo albums, submitted old letters, journals, diaries. Then the archives at the State Historical Society, Carleton County Historical Society, the school let us rummage around in closets and files and boxes. And so some people just did heroic research finding all of this material.
Let's walk through some of the pictures because we just had one up, and maybe they could bring that up again and you can tell us what we're looking at.
Well, this was the, if you'll pardon the expression, the supermarket of the 1890s. That building still stands in the city of Thompson. Its days are numbered. That was the Roika store, a fellow named Henry Roika, R-U-I-K-K-A. That was so badly damaged by the flood in 2012, it's going to have to come down. But that was the shopping area in the 1890s.
Passenger train service?
There were 4 railroads, 5 if you include the line that was abandoned by the Northern Pacific, that crisscrossed the township in the 1890s and early 1900s. This photo I love. It's among the vanished town sites in the community. There was a place called Summit Station. Notice if you look closely, you'll see a fellow sitting on the platform by the windmill, and there's a small child in the foreground on the right.
Oh, sure.
It was a watering and fueling station for the Duluth and Winnipeg, not to be confused with the DW&P. Juntie Brothers became a big store in Esko as well as in another lost community called Harney, H-A-R-N-E-Y. Harney was where the Duluth, Winnipeg, and Pacific Railroad set up a depot in about 1912. The Juntie Brothers opened a general store. If you notice in that photo, there's a horse and buggy, and there's an early car, and there's a bicycle, and you could almost feel the photographer ask in 1916 or 17 when this photo was taken for the patrons to come outside and get their photo taken.
Unique for the time period.
Yeah. The first graduating class of the then new Esko Lincoln School was in 1921. It had 1 student, and her name appropriately was Esko. The second class had 2 students. The third class in 1923 is this class, which had about a dozen students in it, including the 5th from the right was Isaac Esko, the son of the namesake. Isaac's son, Bob Esko, is a major writer in our book, retired biology teacher in
High school basketball, mid-50s.
This was an enormous event, and I was fortunate enough to be a very tiny part of it. In 1955, the Esko boys became the first team from Carleton County to go to the state basketball tournament. The town in northeastern Minnesota was turned upside down. Esko became the darling of the state tournament that year. That skinny fellow who right at the very top of the pyramid there happens to be a freshman boy who's somehow survived to this day sitting here. I was the last splinter on the bench.
Honestly.
That was a great experience.
I'll bet.
Was this really a labor of love for you?
Of course it was. Yeah, it really
Urho
was. Truly.
Kekkonen.
There's President Urho Kekkonen. I've told people that was probably, his visit was probably second only in 1961, was probably second only to the 1955 state basketball tournament.
There you go.
But there's a sea of Finnish Americans if you ever saw it in that photo.
We're just about out of time, but if people want to get the book, where is it available?
Well, probably the easiest place to go to online would be escohistory.com. But there's a dozen outlets in Esko and Cloquet.
Yeah.
We hope in this coming week to have it for sale at outlets in Duluth.
Hey, even if you're not from Esko, it's a wonderful read.
Thank you.
You bet.
We're proud of it.
Yeah.
You should be. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's time now for the week's business news from Business North. Board members of the Duluth Area Chamber of Commerce have thrown their support behind the Polymet mining project. The decision was reached after chamber leaders met first with members of the Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness Environmental Group. Chamber board members were unanimous in their support for Polymet, according to President and CEO David Ross. Minnesota's mining industry is strategic to the area's economy. He said the copper nickel precious metals project will generate thousands of new jobs regionally.
Repealing business-to-business taxes statewide is the top priority of the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, a top executive of the group said Tuesday in Duluth. Bill Blazer said the state would lose about $300 million in revenue, but still have a large budget surplus, even after paying back school districts money owed by the state. Removing that tax is of particular importance in Duluth because it will be applied to warehoused goods, including taconite pellets. With similar storage space available in Superior, which does not charge a tax, he said Duluth could lose that business.
The Grand Rapids Economic Development Authority, in partnership with other organizations, has released an analysis of the Grand Rapids retail market. The market area profile defines the geographic boundary of the retail trade area, identifies the demographic characteristics of customers, and estimates their retail product and service purchases. Local officials say that businesses and developers can use the information to better serve their markets, and it could be useful in developing new businesses and preparing development strategies. For more on these and other business stories, visit businessnorth.com.
If you have a comment on the show, now is the time to call. Dial 218-788-2849 to leave a message or send an email to almanacnorth@wdse.org. And visit the WDSE website for the latest updates on your favorite program, news about the station, and more. And Denny, next Friday is Valentine's Day. You might want to pick me up some chocolates before the show.
I think the box would be empty. I like chocolates.
I really like the dark chocolate sea salt caramels.
Sea salt, huh?
Yeah.
They'll be gone.
Sea salt caramels. For Denny and the crew here at Almanac North, I'm Julie Zenner. Have a great weekend, everyone.